each of the three books in today's lineup really deserves a kind of a video of its own, but I've put them together so that you get three for the price of one. Makes it all the more exciting, really. Our first book is The Bear by Julia Phillips, and not her first novel. Basically, if you were working on, a ferry, and we're in the San Juan Islands, so from mainland to the island, there do be these ferries. And if you were on one of those and what you see swimming in the water is a great big bear, a story is bound to ensue. Quite topical, really, the bear narrative, but we shall get on to that. This is the most extraordinary read. It's probably one of the most... It's not really a fairy tale retelling. It's more of a kind of an exploitation of a theme that comes up in the Snow White and Rose Red story, because we have two sisters and we have a bear. We have, as I said, San Juan Islands, and we have these two sisters who are living on the islands, and they are living with a very unwell or terminally ill mother. And as Phillips goes through this story, you learn that the mother had always presented them with the almost like a kind of an ability to make out of the absolute abject poverty of their lives, or they're just barely surviving poverty of their lives, had managed to make things look glamorous or feel glamorous. She was to them a sort of a larger-than-life storytelling. Incredibly, they thought she was the most beautiful mother in the world. And as you realise that this is a great gift to have given her children. And they have a very, very strong bond, because they are really in it together against adversity. So this bear, anyway, has been seen by the younger of these two sisters, Sam, who works casually on the ferries, having had, a difficulty with her holding down steady jobs, and between layoffs and then rehirings, she's not in the lucky position of having a permanent position, but she gets the work. And then you have the other sister, Elena, who works up at the golf club and has a more stable job, better income, and is more in command of things. She's really the one who runs the household, looks after the bills, makes sure things get done. And you find in this, most of the story is told from the perspective of the younger of these two sisters, Sam, and this unwavering belief that what lies ahead of these two girls is not, more of the same, that what they're going to do is that as soon as their mother dies, which, is inching closer every day, they're going to sell everything, and they're going to have a house, and they're going to have a white rose bush and a red rose bush outside the door. Now, said bear swims onto the island, it turns out, and kind of has chosen their house to rub itself up against, sort of prowl around, and the bear services sort of get involved and say, well, look, it's probably a brown bear or black bear looking for a mate. There are all sorts of logic going on for why the bear would be there, but just don't go too near it. And that is where everything becomes problematic. I'm not going to tell you very much more. The story is about these two girls, the mother and the bear, and how will that all play out. The most amazing feat of this novel is, I think, Phillips' reverse engineering of their relationship, because we get Sam with this absolute unwavering faith in her own sister. But as the further we go through the story, we almost have to look back at bits and see, how did naivety from both sisters, how did that affect their convictions about what was going to happen to them? She uses she lets both girls, I think, have their flaws and their takes on the universe. So it's a little bit of story about how do I grow up? How much of a fairy tale is good for me to believe? How much of it was a gift from their mother? And what were the repercussions of being rooted in unhappiness and using sort of narrative or stories or ideas about yourself or what you can do to get out of this. It's the most astonishingly weird how as the elements can come together and what can possibly happen on a small island, big bear, two girls, and all the flags are there for adventure. I'm going to say that because otherwise it's spoilers. Enjoy it. It's absolutely stunning. In an even more sort of out there genre, if you like, I have got the Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands from Sarah Brooks, which is a debut novel. And my goodness, what a debut novel it is. It's one of those... Okay, so it's not, I would say, classic fantasy. It has fantasy elements, but not the kind of fantasy of magic, dragons, spells, wizards, epic battles, trolls, that lot. It's more a kind of a steampunk Victoriana, kind of sci-fi, not supernatural, unexplained elements where the kind of the fantasy is the landscape and what it contains in said wastelands. So incredibly clever, simple line of narrative. We have a train in this unspecified Victorian era that goes from Beijing to Moscow. The train has to travel across the wastelands, and this has become a kind of an epic journey for many people. They go out of curiosity, and some travellers travel in sort of third class. There is no second class. They travel, for their jobs, or they travel because they need to get to Moscow because they have family there. So there are many reasons why you'd be on this train. And the train is run by the company. Now, all we know at the beginning of this novel is that on the most recent trip, there had been a breach. And the company, because this is a commercial enterprise, you feel will do everything to make sure the train runs, hence sort of capitalism and commercial interest. And you don't hear very much about what happens if a train has been breached or what happens to the occupants of said train or anything. It's just all a bit clouded in mystery because needs must that the economy shall keep going. Onto this train, we have a Maria Petrova. She's going to travel first class, and she has a backstory related to the train as we go through. We'll find more out about her, but ostensibly traveling alone. We have also on the train the little train girl called Zhang Weiwei, who's born on the train and has been given a kind of favor that she's allowed stay on this train on its multiple journeys to and fro as a sort of, little message carrier to sort of cabin person because she has been given the benediction of the only female captain ever to have run the train. There is a botanist, there are wealthy aristocrats and other people who will come into the story in and out for various reasons. What we're trying to find out is what had happened on the previous and what's in the wastelands. So we are traveling alongside these people, and it's fascinating to watch the different characters, the comedy of sort of manners, the etiquette, the correctness of first-class behaviour. What happens when there is a kind of a water shortage and the train, will it get derailed? What is in the wastelands? So from at both ends of the journey, there's a kind of sort of a barrier that the train has to pass through, and there are all sorts of checks. And when they get to the other end, there's very much a check to see, has the train been breached? Has the outside come into the inside? And what the outside is just well worth fabulous descriptive passages of a landscape that's sort of alien and yet not. So you're in that defamiliarization sort of place. I found it to be an absolute romp, but on so many levels working away at ideas of, hierarchy of what we do, what are the cover-ups to make sure that commerce must keep going. What are those costs? What is other? What is an alien landscape? What does it represent? And should we be always trying to keep the other out? What are the dangers? And are the dangers just what people tell us are dangerous? Speaks to very many issues of the current day, but also just a great, wild, unexpected, surprising read. Absolutely, absolutely loved it. And my last one up, very different, much more real world. I mean, they're all real world, even though they're all fantasy, because honestly, who can tell anymore? By Anders Lustgarten. It's called Three Burials. Now, he's already a playwright and has, lots of plays, lots of success, lots of translated, has been on lots of stages. And this was a book that came out of nowhere for me. It was just like, what is this? Because somebody who can write into current politics, the kind of the political situation of refugees, and make you, I was going to say honk with laughter, but it's almost what I was doing. It was just so funny in places, despite the kind of the despairing situation of some of our characters. So basically the story opens, not necessarily the first pages, but let's not be too pedantic here, with a nurse sitting on a beach, lying on a beach, and she's got one hell of a hangover. Her name is Cherry, and she's years of experience as a nurse, and partway down the beach is a body. And the body of the young person, the young man, reminds her very much of her recently deceased son. And in this dead body's hand, there is the clutched photograph, laminated, of a girl that you understand is, you understand its girlfriend. And it's in a London setting with a couple of landmarks. The whole idea is there that this nurse, Cherry, is, for some unknown reason, she's just decided she's going to reunite this corpse with that girl because that's the right thing to do, so he can be given a proper burial. We have a police officer who arrives on scene who actually happened to be in one of the boats that this kind of special ops sort of brigade, led by a rather zealous and very unpleasant police officer, more senior, has decided that their job is border protection. And what they do is whenever they see any of these refugees on boats, they tell them to go back. And to the extent that this young Omar, who had refused to believe that he was going to be turned away from safety, had absolutely believed that they were going to be saved by the civilized Europeans, is murdered. Ensues this absolutely insane journey with said corpse, said police officer, the young one, all across London, trying to find this girl, pursued by very unpleasant police officer, and also by Cherry's husband, who you kind of feel, since the death of the son, that he, doesn't really know what she's up to, and there's kind of a fracturing post-trauma. And there's a daughter who really is so scathingly and appallingly rude to both her parents post, the loss of her brother. You really think that she's irredeemable, but as you go through this novel, you fall more and more and more under the spell of that most wonderful woman. I mean, the women in this are just glorious. They are glorious. The story is, as you can imagine, it's not going to be very much fun. A couple of the men really redeem themselves in it. And there's lots of very sort of squeamishy bits, which you're sort of going, oh, how did he manage to write those without physically sort of gagging? But that's what makes it work. Otherwise, we're just left in, oh my God, the state of refugees, and how does the British government treat them? And how do these institutions, how can they not care to this extent? And where does anger go? And how can we try on a very small level to do at least one right thing? And where will that leave us with, the forces of the law and authority and what we believe is to be a good, true, and right thing to be doing. Again, really, really topical. But my God, I snorted my way through this, laughed out loud. His sentences are just joy. And the book must be, I think, one of my top reads for this year. So there's another one for you. That's the lineup. I hope I didn't waffle too much. I'm quite sure I did. If you enjoyed that, you can like and subscribe, and I will see you for the next one. That's it. Qu'est-ce que je vais te nommer? Je vais te nommer l'amour, l'amour tendre, l'amour qui chante doucement dans mon cœur, l'amour sans logique à la raison.